When Marcus first saw the three tiny cubs lying motionless on the warming mats, their translucent tails curled tight against their trembling bodies, he knew he was looking at death waiting to happen. The distress call had reached his cargo ship 4 days ago, a desperate plea from the sanctuary of last hope on the outer moon of Velar 9. And now, standing in the sterile medical bay, with its harsh blue lighting reflecting off polished metal walls, he understood why the message had sounded so broken. "They won't eat," the voice beside him said. And Marcus turned to see her for the first time. Kira, the sanctuary director, with silver hair that cascaded past her shoulders like a waterfall of moonlight, her pointed ears, the only indication she wasn't human, though her eyes told a different story entirely. Those eyes were ancient oceans, deep green with flecks of gold, and right now they were drowning in exhaustion and grief. She wore fitted tactical pants the color of charcoal and a sleeveless high-neck top in deep blue that seemed designed for both function and style. And her skin had that characteristic Valerian luminescence, a soft glow that made her look like she'd been carved from starlight. "We've tried everything," she continued, her voice cracking just slightly. And Marcus noticed her hands were shaking as she gestured to the rows of untouched food bowls, nutrient paste in every color. Protein cubes precisely calibrated for young Sylvari physiology. Even live prey that sat ignored in containment fields. The cubs were Sylvari, a species Marcus had only read about, rare fox-like creatures with semi-translucent fur that shifted colors with their emotions, currently a sickly gray that made his chest tighten. "How long has it been?" he asked, kneeling beside the smallest cub, a female whose breathing was too shallow, too quick. 6 days since they've taken anything substantial," Kira said, and he heard her move closer, caught the scent of something like rain and electricity that seemed to follow her. "We found them in a crashed transport. Their whole pack was gone. They're the only survivors, and they were already traumatized when we brought them here. But at least they were eating then now," she trailed off. And Marcus didn't need her to finish. 6 days for cubs this young was a death sentence. Maybe they had 2 days left. Maybe less. Marcus wasn't a xenobiologist or an animal behavioral specialist. He was a freight hauler who'd spent the last 15 years moving cargo across the outer reaches. But he'd grown up on a farm on Earth, back before he'd ever seen the stars. And he'd raised orphaned animals before, remembered the hollow look in their eyes, the way they'd give up when the world had taken everything from them. "Tell me what you've tried," he said, not looking away from the cubs. And Kira listed it all: every nutritional formula approved by the Galactic Wildlife Preservation Council, every feeding technique documented in the Sylvari conservation databases, temperature variations, texture modifications, even neural stimulation to trigger hunger responses. All of it scientific, all of it logical, all of it useless. The smallest cub's ear twitched when Marcus slowly extended his hand, not touching, just letting her catch his scent, and for a moment her tail uncurled slightly before wrapping tight again. "They're not just hungry," Marcus said quietly, pieces falling together in his mind. "They're grieving, they're terrified, and everything you're giving them is just food, nutrition. It's not comfort." Kira made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Comfort doesn't keep them alive, Marcus. Calories do. Nutrients do on Earth," Marcus interrupted, standing to face her. "When someone's going through hell, when they've lost everything, we don't give them protein cubes. We make them soup, broth, something warm that smells like safety and tastes like someone cares." Kira's expression shifted through confusion to something that might have been hope, dangerous and fragile. "You want to cook for them," she said, and it wasn't quite a question. "Your ship's distress call said you needed someone who understood animals and had experience with cross-species nutrition," Marcus replied. "But what you really needed was someone who understands that sometimes survival isn't about science. It's about soul." The sanctuary's kitchen was designed for preparing dozens of different species' dietary requirements, all sterile surfaces and precise temperature controls, but Marcus ignored most of it, instead rummaging through his own ship's supplies that he'd brought with him, things that made the other sanctuary workers exchange puzzled glances as he laid them out on the counter. Kira watched from the doorway, her arms crossed, and Marcus was hyper-aware of her presence, the way she radiated this intensity that made his pulse do complicated things. "Chicken bones," she said, reading the label on one of his vacuum-sealed packages. "You brought chicken bones to a rescue operation?" "I bring ingredients everywhere," Marcus said, already setting a large pot on the heat element. You spend enough time in space eating recycled paste. You start to really value the ability to make real food. He added the bones to the pot, then water, and began pulling out other items, dried vegetables he'd gotten from a trade station, herbs from earth that he grew in his ship's tiny hydroponics bay, a piece of ginger root that had cost him 2 weeks' profit, but was worth every credit. Kira moved closer, her curiosity apparently overriding her skepticism. And when she stood beside him, he realized she was exactly his height, their eyes level. And up close he could see the faint patterns in her luminescent skin, like constellations just beneath the surface. "What are you making?" she asked, and her voice had softened from the brittle desperation of earlier. "Bone broth," Marcus said, adjusting the temperature down, knowing this couldn't be rushed. "My grandmother's recipe. More or less she used to make it when I was sick, or sad, or when the world felt too big and too hard. It's not about the nutritional profile, though that's decent enough. It's about the smell, the warmth, the way it makes you feel like someone's taking care of you." He added the vegetables, the herbs. Watch the water begin to shimmer with heat. "The Silvari are predators, right? Fox-like biology?" Kira nodded. "Their natural diet is primarily meat-based, high protein, moderate fat. Then their instincts know what bone broth is," Marcus said. "It's primal. It's what their ancestors would have eaten. Rich and nourishing, and it smells like pack and safety and home." As the broth began to simmer, filling the kitchen with an aroma that made even the Valerian staff members stop and inhale with surprised interest, Marcus told Kira about his childhood, about the farm, about the fox kit he'd found orphaned in the woods when he was 12. "She wouldn't eat either," he said, stirring the pot slowly. "My parents wanted to take her to a wildlife center, but I convinced them to give me 3 days, and I sat with her, kept her warm. And I made her broth from rabbit bones, because that's what foxes would naturally scavenge." Just the smell of it got her nose twitching. And then she took a little, and then a little more. And by the 3rd day she was licking the bowl clean. Kira was quiet for a long moment. And when Marcus glanced at her, he saw that luminescence had brightened slightly, her skin glowing warmer. "You really think it will work?" she asked. And there was something vulnerable in her voice, something that made Marcus want to promise her everything. "I think," he said carefully, "that those cubs have been fed like patients in a hospital. And what they need is to be fed like children who've lost their family. And there's a difference." Kira's hand moved, just slightly, and her fingers brushed his on the spoon handle, the contact sending a cascade of warmth up his arm. "I've been running this sanctuary for 5 years," she said. "I've saved hundreds of creatures. But these 3, I can't lose them, Marcus. I can't watch them fade because I didn't know how to reach them." Her voice broke on the last word, and Marcus did something he probably shouldn't have. He covered her hand with his fully, gently. "We won't lose them," he said, and he meant it with everything in him. 3 hours later, when the broth had reduced to a rich, golden liquid that smelled like comfort and home and everything safe in the universe, Marcus strained it carefully into a large container, then poured a portion into a shallow bowl. Kira had stayed with him the entire time, and they'd talked about everything: her life on Lara 9, growing up as the daughter of the sanctuary's founder, learning that sometimes caring meant letting go, and sometimes it meant holding on with everything you had. His years in space, running from a planet that had felt too small, finding that the stars were vast but lonely without connection. She laughed when he told her about the time he'd accidentally shipped live Terran chickens instead of frozen ones, and had spent 2 weeks with a cargo hold full of confused poultry. And he loved the sound of that laugh, bright and genuine, transforming her face from beautiful to absolutely radiant. Now, carrying the bowl of broth to the medical bay, with Kira beside him, Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Because if this didn't work, he didn't have a backup plan. And those cubs didn't have time for trial and error. The medical bay was dimmer than before, set to evening cycle, and the 3 cubs were curled together in a pile of gray, translucent fur that barely rose with their breathing. Marcus knelt slowly, placed the bowl on the floor about a foot from them, and waited. Nothing happened. 30 seconds passed, then a minute, and Marcus heard Kira's breathing catch, felt the weight of her disappointment like a physical thing. Then the smallest cub, the female, lifted her head, her nose twitched. Once, twice, and Marcus held perfectly still, barely breathing, aware that Kira had grabbed his shoulder, her fingers tight with tension. The little cub's ears swiveled forward, focused on the bull, and her translucent fur began to shift, the sickly gray washing with pale blue, then soft gold. She uncurled slowly, shakily, and took one step forward on legs that trembled with weakness. Behind her, the other two cubs stirred, their noses lifting to catch the scent, and Marcus watched their tails thin, translucent, lifeless tails begin to twitch. The female cub reached the bowl and paused, and Marcus thought, please, 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 a prayer to any universe that was listening. And then she lowered her head and lapped at the broth. The sound of it seemed impossibly loud in the quiet bay. And then she was drinking in earnest, her whole body quivering. And her tail lifted and began to wag, a slow, weak movement. That was the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen. The other two cubs stumbled forward, crowding around the bowl. And within seconds all three were drinking desperately, their tails wagging with increasing strength, their fur cascading through colors blue and gold and soft green and warm amber. A light show of emotion and relief and hunger finally acknowledged. Kira's hand tightened on Marcus's shoulder hard enough to bruise, and when he turned to look at her, there were tears streaming down her glowing cheeks, tracking paths of light down her face. It's working, she whispered, her voice wrecked with joy and disbelief. Marcus, it's actually working. He covered her hand with his, squeezed back, and felt something in his chest crack open and bloom. The cubs drained the bowl in minutes, and Marcus slowly, carefully, poured more from the container he'd brought, watching as they attacked the second serving with even more enthusiasm. Their tails wagging so hard their whole back ends were wiggling, a sight that made him grin like an idiot. Kira had slid down to sit beside him on the floor, her shoulder pressed against his, and they watched in silence as the cubs ate and ate, making small chirping sounds of contentment that the medical monitor translated as good, safe, more. When they'd finally had their fill, the three cubs curled back together in their pile, but now their fur was a warm, healthy gold, their breathing deep and even, and as Marcus and Kira watched, the smallest female looked directly at Marcus and made a sound that didn't need translation. It was pure gratitude, pure trust. She knows you saved her, Kira said softly, and when Marcus looked at her, he found her face inches from his, those ocean eyes locked on him with an expression that made his breath catch. You saved all of them, and I thought I was going to have to watch them die. And you walked in and understood what I couldn't see. You were too close to it, Marcus said, acutely aware that her hand was still on his shoulder, that his was still covering it. Sometimes you need someone from outside to see what's missing. And you would have figured it out eventually. I just had the advantage of being raised by a stubborn grandmother who believed every problem could be solved with the right food and enough love. Kira laughed. That bright sound again, but softer now, intimate in the dimness of the bay. Is that the secret to humanity's success in the galaxy? Soup and stubbornness? Pretty much, Marcus said, and then before he could overthink it, before he could remember all the reasons this was complicated, he added, that, and knowing when we've found something worth staying for. The words hung in the air between them, charged and dangerous and real, and Kira's expression shifted, the humor fading into something deeper, something that made Marcus's heart feel like it was trying to escape his chest. You're staying? She asked, and it was barely a whisper. If you want me to, Marcus said. My shipping route is flexible, and I think these cubs might need more Earth-style cooking for a while, until they're strong enough for normal Sylvari nutrition. And someone needs to teach your staff the proper way to make bone broth. And Marcus, Kira interrupted, and her free hand came up to touch his face, her fingers, cool and gentle against his cheek. I want you to stay, not for the cubs. I mean, yes, for them too. But I want you to stay for. She stopped, bit her lip, and Marcus saw the vulnerability there. The fear of rejection, the same fear he was feeling. For us, he finished, for her. Because I've been in space for 15 years, and I've never met anyone who made me want to stop running until I saw you trying to hold the world together for 3 dying cubs. And I don't know what this is or where it goes, but I know I don't want to walk away from it. Kira's eyes went bright with fresh tears, but she was smiling, luminescent and stunning and completely undone. I've spent 5 years married to this sanctuary, telling myself I didn't have room in my life for anything else. And then you show up with chicken bones and a grandmother's recipe, and you make me remember that saving lives is important, but living one matters too. She leaned forward, slowly, giving him every chance to pull away. And Marcus closed the distance instead, meeting her halfway in a kiss that was gentle and certain and felt like coming home after a very long journey through the dark. The cubs made soft sleeping sounds in their pile, tails still twitching with dreams that were hopefully warmer now, safer. And Marcus wrapped his arms around Kira as she melted against him, the glow of her skin brightening until they were both bathed in soft light. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kira rested her forehead against his and whispered, "Stay, teach me to cook Earth style. Show me all the ways. I've been too focused on the science to see the soul. And let me show you why Lara 9 is worth stopping for." "Deal," Marcus said, and kissed her again, softer this time, a promise rather than a question. They stayed there on the floor of the medical bay for a long time, holding each other as the cubs slept their first peaceful sleep in days. And Marcus thought about the strange path that had led him here, all the deliveries and detours, the distress call he could have ignored, the decision to bring ingredients instead of just himself. Sometimes, he realized, the universe didn't need grand gestures or complex solutions. Sometimes it just needed someone willing to make soup and care about the details that mattered, the warmth and comfort and soul of survival. And sometimes in the process of saving something else, you ended up saving yourself too. Over the following weeks, Marcus moved his operations to Lara 9, setting up a permanent berth for his ship and integrating himself into the sanctuary's rhythms and routines. The cubs, named by Kira as Nova, Shimmer, and Little Sparks, the brave female who'd eaten first, thrived on a diet that slowly transitioned from Marcus's broths to more standard fare. But they always got a bowl of Earth-style comfort food once a day, and their tails never failed to wag frantically when they smelled it cooking. Marcus taught the sanctuary staff his techniques, showing them how to layer flavors and aromas to create food that appealed to instinct and emotion, not just nutritional requirements, and he watched as recovery rates improved across species. As traumatized, rescues began responding to meals that smelled like care instead of just sustenance. But mostly, he spent time with Kira, learning her routines, the way she checked every habitat twice before allowing herself to rest, the fierce intelligence with which she approached every problem, the softness she showed only when she thought no one was watching. They cooked together in the evenings, her learning his Earth recipes while she taught him Valerian dishes that tasted like starlight and electricity. And they talked endlessly, about everything and nothing, building something between them that felt solid and real and terrifyingly important. The cubs bonded to both of them, following Marcus around the sanctuary like translucent shadows, but always returning to Kira for comfort and watching her curl up with all three of them in her lap. Her silver hair mixing with their golden fur made Marcus's chest ache with a feeling he was finally ready to call by its real name. 3 months after his arrival, the Galactic Wildlife Preservation Council came to inspect the sanctuary, their official report noting with surprise the innovative integration of species-specific psychological comfort measures into nutritional protocols, resulting in measurably improved outcomes for traumatized juveniles across multiple species classifications. Kira laughed when she read it. Sprawled on the couch in her quarters with Marcus, the cubs sleeping in a pile at their feet, "They made your soup sound like a scientific breakthrough," she said, her eyes dancing with amusement. "It kind of is," Marcus said, playing with a strand of her silver hair, still amazed that he got to do this, that she was his and he was hers in all the ways that mattered. The breakthrough is remembering that the creatures we're saving aren't just biological machines. They're beings with emotions and needs beyond the physical. And treating them like that makes all the difference. Kira shifted to look at him directly, her expression going serious. "You make all the difference, Marcus, not just to them, to me. I was so focused on the mechanics of survival that I'd forgotten about the living part. And you reminded me, every single day you remind me that there's joy in this work, not just duty." She paused, and he saw nervousness flicker across her features, her luminescence pulsing slightly. "The council offered us a grant, a big one, to expand the sanctuary and document our new protocols, which means we could save even more lives, build better facilities. But it would mean committing to staying here, to making this our permanent work, both of us. And I know you gave up your shipping routes for me, but I don't want you to feel trapped." Marcus stopped her with a kiss, firm and certain. "Kira, I'm not trapped. I'm home. For the first time in 15 years, I'm exactly where I want to be, doing work that matters with someone who matters more than I knew anyone could." So yes, absolutely yes to all of it. The sanctuary expansion took a year, and by the time it was complete, Nova, Shimmer, and Sparks were nearly full-grown, their translucent fur now shot through with permanent streaks of gold that the xenobiologist said was unprecedented in Sylvari development, likely a result of the unique bonding circumstances of their early trauma and recovery. The three of them had become ambassadors for the sanctuary. Their story and Marcus's soup featured in conservation programs across the galaxy, and they still demanded their daily bowl of broth, still wagged their tails with puppyish enthusiasm, despite their size and maturity, still followed Marcus and Kira everywhere like they were pack leaders, which Marcus supposed they were. On the 1-year anniversary of the day Marcus had first arrived, Kira took him to the highest point of the sanctuary, an observation platform that overlooked the habitats and beyond them, the stunning purple and silver landscape of Velar 9, with its double moons rising on the horizon. They stood together in the twilight, her hand in his, and Marcus thought about the path that had brought him here, all the choices and chances, the distress call that had changed everything. "I never answered your original question," Kira said suddenly, and when Marcus looked at her questioningly, she continued, "That first day, in the kitchen, you asked me what we'd tried, and I told you all the scientific approaches. But I never answered the real question, which was, what had I tried personally? From my heart, not my training." She turned to face him fully, both hands gripping his now. "The answer was nothing. I'd given them everything I knew professionally, but nothing of myself. No vulnerability, no personal touch. Because I was afraid if I let myself care that deeply and still failed, it would break me. And then you showed up and cared with your whole heart, like it was the easiest thing in the world. And it made me braver. Marcus, you make me braver every day." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. This woman who fought so hard for every life in her care, who glowed literal light and somehow still chose him, still looked at him like he'd hung her double moons in the sky. "You want to know a secret?" he said, pulling her closer. "I was terrified. When I made that broth I was shaking, because what if I was wrong? What if this stupid idea from Earth didn't work and those cubs died anyway? But then I looked at you and I thought, she needs this to work, not just for them, but for her. And I needed to be the person who could make that happen. So I guess we made each other braver." Kira's luminescence brightened until she was nearly glowing, and she reached into her pocket, pulled out something small that glinted in the moonlight. On Velara, when two people decide their family, they exchange tokens made from sanctuary stone. It's a promise that you'll be each other's safe place, each other's home. And I know Earth has different traditions, and maybe this is too fast or too much, but Marcus kissed her breathless, then pulled back just enough to whisper against her lips, "Show me how it works," with shaking hands that mirrored his own trembling. Kira slipped a band of polished blue-black stone onto his finger, and he felt warmth pulse from it, a gentle heat that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. "It attunes to you," she explained softly, "and to me. And we'll always be able to find each other now, feel each other, know when the other needs us." Marcus took the second band from her palm and slid it onto her finger, watching as it began to glow softly, matching her luminescence, and he felt it too. A new awareness settling into his chest, a sense of her that was comfortable and right and permanent. "Family," he said, testing the word. "Home," Kira confirmed, and then she was in his arms, and they were kissing under the double moons of Velar 9. Two people from different worlds who'd found each other through 3 stubborn cubs and a pot of soup. And Marcus knew without a doubt that every long year in the dark had been worth it to end up here. Exactly here, with her, below them, from the habitats. A chorus of sounds rose, the calls and songs of dozens of species, all rescues, all survivors, all finding their way back to life with patience and care and yes, sometimes the right kind of comfort food. And if 3 particular sounds rose above the others, the distinctive chirp howls of Sylvari cubs, who weren't cubs anymore, but still knew when their humans were happy, well, that just made everything more perfect. Marcus held Kira close and thought about the title. He'd give his own story if he ever told it, maybe something like "The Day I Learned That Saving Lives is About Feeding Souls, Not Just Bodies," and how 3 impossible cubs taught me that home isn't a place. It's a choice you make every single day. But that was too long and too sentimental. So he'd probably just call it "the best distress call I ever answered," and leave it at that. Let the rest be private, be theirs, be the story they'd keep building together, one day at a time. One bowl of soup at a time, one choice to stay at a time, forever.